first contact, the massive alien cruiser emerged from hyperspace, its sleek, obsidian hull gleaming against the backdrop of unfamiliar stars. Inside the vessel's bridge, Captain Zara Exelith surveyed the blue-green world before her with a mixture of curiosity and apprehension. Earth, the home planet of the newly discovered human species, loomed large in the viewscreen. "Status report," Zara commanded, her voice a melodious trill that belied the tension coursing through her lean, avian frame. Her first officer, Crowell, consulted a nearby console. "All systems nominal, Captain. We're maintaining standard orbit as requested by Earth's governing body." Zara nodded, her iridescent feathers ruffling slightly. "And our guest?" Crowell's beak clicked in what passed for a grimace among the Avari. "The human diplomat is ready for transport, though I must again voice my concerns about bringing one of their kind aboard our ship. The decontamination protocols have been thoroughly implemented," Zara interrupted. "I share your reservations, Crowell, but the Galactic Council was clear. If we're to establish formal relations with this species, we must make certain concessions." As if on cue, a chime sounded from the communications array. "Captain," a voice chirped, "the human is ready for transport." Zara took a deep breath, steeling herself. "Very well, bring him aboard." Moments later, Zara stood rigid in the ship's main airlock, flanked by a contingent of guards. The massive doors hissed open, revealing a solitary figure. Ambassador Michael Chen stepped forward, a disarming smile on his face. He was of average height for a human, with short black hair and warm brown eyes that crinkled at the corners. His crisp blue suit stood in stark contrast to the metallic sheen of the ship's interior. "Greetings, Captain Exelith," Michael said, bowing slightly. "On behalf of the people of Earth, I thank you for this historic opportunity." Zara's large, golden eyes widened almost imperceptibly. The human's voice was pleasant, lacking the harsh guttural tones she'd expected. Still, she maintained her composure, inclining her head in a formal nod. "Ambassador Chen, welcome aboard the Stellar Wind. If you'll follow me, we've prepared quarters for your stay." As they walked through the ship's winding corridors, Zara couldn't help but notice the reactions of her crew. Some openly stared, while others averted their gaze or even recoiled as Michael passed. The human, for his part, seemed oblivious to the effect he was having, instead marveling at the ship's architecture. "Remarkable," Michael murmured, running a hand along the wall covered in pulsating bioluminescent patterns. "Is this some form of organic technology?" Zara blinked, surprised by the human's perception. "Yes, actually. Our ships are grown rather than built, incorporating living tissue that responds to our needs." Michael's eyes lit up. "Fascinating. I'd love to learn more about the process, if you're willing to share." Before Zara could respond, a young Avari technician rounded the corner, nearly colliding with the group. Her eyes went wide with shock as she came face to face with Michael. "By the eternal nest," the technician squawked, stumbling backward. "It's hideous." Michael's smile faltered for a moment, but he quickly recovered. "I assure you, the feeling isn't mutual. I find your species quite beautiful, actually." The technician's feathers puffed out in alarm, and she quickly scurried away. Zara felt a pang of embarrassment at her crew member's behavior. "My apologies, Ambassador," she said stiffly. "Many of our kind have never encountered a human." Michael supplied, his tone gentle. "No need to apologize, Captain. I understand this is new territory for all of us. That's why I'm here, to bridge the gap between our species." Zara studied the human carefully. There was an earnestness in his demeanor that she hadn't expected. Perhaps this diplomatic mission wouldn't be the disaster she feared. As they continued their tour, Michael peppered Zara with questions about Avari culture, technology, and biology. His genuine interest and quick grasp of complex concepts began to chip away at Zara's preconceptions. They eventually arrived at the ship's expansive hydroponics bay, a lush garden filled with exotic alien flora. Michael's eyes widened in wonder as he took in the riot of colors and scents. "This is incredible," he breathed. "May I?" Zara nodded, and Michael approached a delicate purple flower, its petals shimmering with an inner light. He leaned in, inhaling deeply. Suddenly, the flower's stamens extended, wrapping around Michael's face. He stumbled backward, letting out a startled yelp. "Ambassador!" Zara cried, rushing forward, but before she could reach him, Michael had already extricated himself, laughing. "Well, that was unexpected," he chuckled, rubbing his nose. "I suppose I should have asked permission before getting so friendly with the local flora." Zara stared at him, baffled by his reaction. Any Avari would have been traumatized by such an encounter, yet this human seemed amused. "Are you all right?" she asked, her professional demeanor slipping slightly to reveal genuine concern. Michael nodded, still grinning. "Oh, I'm fine. No harm done. Though I might need to update my report on alien plants with personal space issues." Despite herself, Zara felt the corners of her beak twitch in what might have been the beginnings of a smile. This human was different from what she'd expected. As they made their way to the guest quarters, Zara found herself relaxing slightly in Michael's presence. His easy manner and quick wit were disarming, making it easy to forget the physical differences between them. "Here we are," Zara announced as they reached a set of ornate doors. "These will be your quarters for the duration of your stay. We've done our best to accommodate human needs, but please let us know if anything is lacking." Michael stepped inside, his eyes widening as he took in the spacious room. The walls pulsed with the same bioluminescent patterns they'd seen throughout the ship, casting a soft, ethereal glow. A large viewport dominated one wall, offering a breathtaking view of Earth below. "This is more than generous, Captain," Michael said, turning to face her. "Thank you for your hospitality." Zara nodded stiffly, suddenly unsure of how to proceed. The usual protocols for dealing with alien dignitaries seemed inadequate in the face of this unexpectedly personable human. "There will be a formal dinner this evening to welcome you aboard," she said finally. "Until then, please feel free to rest and refresh yourself. If you need anything, simply speak your request aloud. The room will respond to your voice." Michael's eyebrows rose. "Impressive. Your technology continues to amaze me, Captain." As Zara turned to leave, Michael called out softly, "Captain Exlith." She paused, looking back at him. "Yes, Ambassador." Michael's expression was earnest, his eyes meeting hers without hesitation. "I want you to know that I understand the reservations your people might have about humans. We're different, and difference can be frightening. But I'm here to show you that we have more in common than you might think. I hope that during my time here, we can move past our preconceptions and forge a true connection between our species." For a long moment, Zara simply stared at the human, taken aback by his directness and sincerity. Finally, she gave a small nod. "That is a noble goal, Ambassador. We shall see what comes of it." As the doors slid shut behind her, Zara found herself pondering the enigma that was Michael Chen. He was nothing like the crude, aggressive creature she'd been led to expect. Could it be possible that humans were more than the sum of their biological quirks? Shaking her head to clear it of such thoughts, Zara made her way back to the bridge. She had a ship to run and a crew to prepare for the challenges ahead. Whatever came of this diplomatic mission, one thing was certain: life aboard the Stellar Wind would never be the same. Cultural clash. The grand dining hall of the Stellar Wind hummed with nervous energy as the ship's senior staff gathered for the welcoming dinner. Captain Zara Exlith stood near the entrance, her golden eyes scanning the room. The Avari officers huddled in small groups, speaking in hushed tones and casting furtive glances toward the door. "He's late," Kroll muttered, coming to stand beside Zara. Typical human discourtesy, I'm sure. Before Zara could respond, the doors slid open, and Ambassador Michael Chen strode in. He changed into a sleek, dark suit that complemented the metallic sheen of the ship's interior. As he entered, a hush fell over the room. My apologies for the delay, Michael said, his voice carrying clearly across the silent hall. I'm afraid I got a bit turned around in your beautiful ship. The living corridors are quite the maze for a newcomer. Zara stepped forward, inclining her head in greeting. Welcome, Ambassador. We're pleased you could join us. As she led Michael to the head table, Zara couldn't help but notice the mixed reactions of her crew. Some seemed curious, leaning in for a closer look at the human, while others recoiled, their feathers ruffling in discomfort. The meal began, a carefully curated selection of dishes meant to showcase a varied cuisine while accommodating human dietary needs. Michael approached each new food with enthusiasm, asking questions about ingredients and preparation methods. This is exquisite, he said, sampling a vibrant blue fruit. The flavor reminds me of a cross between a mango and a star anise. Do you cultivate these in your hydroponics bay? Dr. Leary, the ship's xenobiologist, perked up at the question. Yes, actually. The zephyr fruit is notoriously difficult to grow off-world, but we've managed to recreate its native conditions quite accurately. As the conversation flowed, Zara found herself relaxing slightly. Perhaps this dinner wouldn't be the disaster she'd feared. But then, inevitably, the topic turned to more sensitive matters. Ambassador, Kral said, his tone sharp, I'm curious about human waste management practices. Our research indicates that your species' excretory habits are quite primitive. A tense silence fell over the table. Zara shot Kral a warning glance, but Michael simply smiled. Yes. I imagine our plumbing systems might seem a bit crude compared to your advanced technology, he said. But we're always looking for ways to improve. In fact, some of our latest waste recycling methods have shown promising results in terraform. He was cut off by a strangled sound from across the table. Lieutenant Vex, a young officer, had turned a sickly shade of green. You recycle your own waste. Vex gasped, looking horrified. Michael blinked, realizing his misstep. Well, not directly. It's a complex process that. But it was too late. Vex bolted from the table, followed closely by several other distressed-looking Avari. An uncomfortable silence descended on the remaining diners. Michael cleared his throat, his usual confidence faltering for the first time since his arrival. I appear to have caused some distress, he said softly. That certainly wasn't my intent. Zara found herself in the difficult position of mediating between her crew's sensibilities and diplomatic necessity. Perhaps we should move on to less controversial topics, she suggested. The remainder of the dinner passed in stilted conversation, the earlier warmth replaced by a palpable tension. As the meal concluded, Zara escorted Michael back to his quarters, an awkward silence stretching between them. Captain, Michael said as they reached his door, I want to apologize for my insensitivity earlier. I should have been more mindful of cultural differences. Zara studied him for a moment, noting the genuine remorse in his expression. Your willingness to discuss such matters openly is admirable, Ambassador. But perhaps a more gradual approach would be wise. Michael nodded, a rueful smile playing at his lips. Noted. I'll do my best to be less shocking in the future. As Zara turned to leave, an alarm suddenly blared through the ship's corridors. Red warning lights pulsed along the walls, casting an eerie glow. Captain Exelith to the bridge immediately. Krell's voice crackled over the intercom. We have a situation. Zara's feathers bristled with tension. I must go, she said to Michael. Please remain in your quarters until further notice. But as she hurried toward the bridge, she realized the human was following her. Ambassador, I must insist. With all due respect, Captain, Michael interrupted, keeping pace with her long strides. If there's a crisis, I may be able to help. At the very least, I should be informed of any developments that might affect Earth. Zara hesitated for a moment, then nodded curtly. There was no time to argue. They burst onto the bridge together, greeted by a scene of controlled chaos. Officers rushed between stations, calling out reports and status updates. Report, Zara barked, striding to the command center. Krell turned to her, his expression grim. "We've detected a massive energy surge from the planet's surface. It doesn't match any known human technology." Michael stepped forward, brow furrowed. "May I see the readings?" After a moment's hesitation, Zara nodded to Krell, who brought up a holographic display. Michael studied it intently, his eyes widening. "This can't be right," he muttered. "These energy signatures, they're not of human origin." A ripple of surprise ran through the bridge crew. Zara fixed Michael with a piercing stare. "Explain." Michael ran a hand through his hair, his mind racing. "I'm no physicist, but I've seen classified reports on experimental energy research. This is beyond anything we're capable of producing. If I had to guess, I'd say it's more in line with your level of technology." Krell scoffed. "Ridiculous. We have no secret installations on Earth." "Perhaps not," Zara said slowly, "but that doesn't mean someone else doesn't." A tense silence fell over the bridge as the implications sank in. If there was advanced alien technology hidden on Earth, it could upend the delicate first contact negotiations. "We need more information," Zara declared. "Krell, assemble a survey team. We'll send a shuttle to investigate the source of the energy readings." "I'd like to volunteer to join the team," Michael said, straightening his shoulders. Zara turned to him, surprised. "Ambassador, this could be dangerous. We can't guarantee your safety." Michael met her gaze steadily. "All the more reason for me to go. This is my planet we're talking about. Besides, you'll need someone who knows Earth's terrain and can interact with the locals if necessary." For a long moment, Zara studied the human, weighing the risks against the potential benefits of his presence. Finally, she nodded. "Very well, Ambassador, but you will follow our protocols to the letter. Is that understood?" "Perfectly, Captain," Michael replied, a determined glint in his eye. As the survey team prepared for their mission, Zara couldn't shake a feeling of unease. This unexpected development had the potential to either bring their species closer together or drive them irrevocably apart. And somehow, she suspected, the outcome would hinge on the actions of the enigmatic human who had so thoroughly disrupted life aboard her ship. "Shuttle Bay 2, prepare for launch," Zara commanded, watching as Michael joined the Avari survey team. "And may the eternal nest watch over you all." As the shuttle departed, carrying its mixed crew of aliens and one determined human toward an unknown threat, Zara could only hope that the trust she was placing in Ambassador Chen wouldn't prove to be a catastrophic mistake. Unlikely alliance. The shuttle descended through Earth's atmosphere, its advanced cloaking technology rendering it invisible to human detection systems. Inside, Ambassador Michael Chen sat among the Avari survey team, acutely aware of the tension radiating from his alien companions. Lieutenant Vex, the young officer who had fled the dinner party, kept shooting nervous glances at Michael. The others maintained a professional demeanor, but their stiff postures betrayed their discomfort at having a human in their midst. "We're approaching the coordinates of the energy surge," announced Tyra, the shuttle's pilot. Her taloned fingers danced across the holographic controls. "Prepare for landing." Michael peered out the viewport, recognizing the terrain below. "This is the Modav Desert," he said. "Sparsely populated, but home to several military installations. We'll need to be cautious." Commander Zhen, the leader of the survey team, nodded curtly. "Understood, Ambassador. We'll follow your lead once we're on the ground." The shuttle touched down silently in a small canyon, hidden from prying eyes. As the team disembarked, Michael felt a rush of both excitement and trepidation. He was about to explore his own planet alongside alien visitors, a scenario straight out of science fiction. "Energy readings are strongest in that direction," Vex reported, indicating a rocky outcropping to the east. The team moved out, their environmental suits shimmering as adaptive camouflage kicked in. Michael, lacking such advanced gear, had to rely on more traditional stealth techniques as they picked their way across the desert landscape. As they crested a hill, a startling sight greeted them. Nestled in the valley below was a sleek, silvery structure that was decidedly not of human origin. Its architecture was fluid and organic, reminiscent of the stellar wind's interior. "By the eternal nest," Jen breathed. "That's Axaran technology." Michael turned to the commander, confusion evident on his face. "Theron? I'm not familiar with that species." Jen's expression darkened. "Ancient rivals of the Avari. We thought they had gone extinct millennia ago." Before Michael could press for more information, a high-pitched whine filled the air. Beams of energy lanced out from the structure, narrowly missing the survey team. "Take cover," Den shouted, diving behind a boulder. Michael rolled behind a small outcropping, heart pounding. This was definitely not how he had envisioned his diplomatic mission unfolding. As energy blasts continued to pepper their position, Vex called out in panic, "Our weapons aren't charged. We're defenseless." Michael's mind raced. They needed a plan, and fast. "Commander," he shouted over the din, "does your shuttle have any offensive capabilities?" Jen shook his head. "Negative. It's a scientific vessel, not a warship." Michael grimaced. They were outgunned and trapped. But then an idea struck him. "What about your communication systems? Can you send a targeted electromagnetic pulse?" The Avari looked at him in surprise. "Yes, but it would only temporarily disrupt their systems. How would that help?" "It'll buy us time," Michael explained quickly. "There's a network of caves not far from here. If we can reach them, we might be able to regroup and figure out our next move." Jen considered for a moment, then nodded. "It's our best option. Tira, initiate the EMP on my mark. Everyone else, prepare to run." Michael tensed, ready to sprint. He caught Vex's eye and gave what he hoped was a reassuring nod. The young Navari's feathers were ruffled in fear, but he managed a shaky nod in return. "Now," Jen commanded. A wave of invisible energy pulsed out from the shuttle. The energy beams from the Axaran structure flickered and died. "Go, go, go," Michael shouted, leaping from cover. The team raced across the open ground, Michael leading the way toward the distant cave system. His lungs burned as he pushed himself to the limit, all too aware of the precious seconds ticking away. They had almost reached the caves when the whine of energy weapons started up again. A blast struck the ground just behind Vex, sending him tumbling. Without hesitation, Michael skidded to a stop and turned back. He grabbed the fallen Avari, hauling him to his feet. "Come on, we're almost there." Supporting Vex, Michael half-carried him the last few meters into the shelter of the caves. The rest of the team followed close behind, diving into the cool darkness just as another barrage of energy blasts peppered the cave entrance. For a moment, the only sound was their heavy breathing echoing off the stone walls. Then, to everyone's surprise, Vex spoke up. You came back for me," he said, staring at Michael with wide, disbelieving eyes. Michael managed a wry smile. "Of course. We're in this together, aren't we?" A look of shame crossed Vex's features. "But I thought humans were disgusting, primitive." Michael supplied with a chuckle. "It's okay. First impressions aren't always accurate. On either side." Zen stepped forward, his posture conveying grudging respect. "Your quick thinking saved us, Ambassador. Perhaps we underestimated your species." Michael nodded, accepting the compliment. "We may not have your technology, but humans have a knack for improvisation. Now, let's figure out our next move." As the team gathered to assess their situation, Michael couldn't help but feel a spark of hope. In the face of a common enemy, the barriers between human and Avari were starting to crumble. Their planning session was interrupted by a soft beat from Tira's communicator. "It's the stellar wind," she announced. "They're requesting an update." Jen took the device, quickly relaying their discovery and current predicament to Captain Exelith. Michael listened intently, trying to gauge the captain's reaction from Zen's responses. Finally, Jen turned to the group. "The captain is mobilizing a response team. but it will take time for them to reach us without alerting Earth's authorities. We're on our own for now." Michael frowned, an idea forming. "Maybe not entirely on our own. I have some contacts in the US military. If I can reach them, we might be able to get some covert support." The Avari exchanged uneasy glances. "Absolutely not," Jen said firmly. "We cannot risk exposing our presence to your military." "With all due respect, Commander," Michael countered, "we may not have a choice. If the Exarin are building some kind of superweapon on Earth, it threatens both our species. We need all the help we can get." A tense silence fell over the group as they weighed their options. Finally, Vex spoke up. I think we should trust the ambassador. He saved my life. Maybe his people can be trusted too." Jen's feathers ruffled in agitation, but after a moment he nodded. "Very well, but we must proceed with extreme caution. The fate of both our worlds may hang in the balance." Michael pulled out his secure communicator, silently thanking the diplomatic course for insisting he bring it along. "I'll make the call. But first, we need to gather more intelligence on that Xeran facility. Any volunteers for a recon mission?" To everyone's surprise, Vex stepped forward. "I'll go with you, Ambassador." Michael smiled, sensing the beginning of an unlikely friendship. "All right then, let's see what we can find out about our mysterious neighbors." As Michael and Vex prepared for their scouting mission, the human couldn't help but marvel at how quickly circumstances had changed. He had come to the stellar wind, hoping to bridge the gap between their species. Now, faced with a common threat, that goal seemed more attainable than ever. But as they ventured back out into the desert night, the ominous silhouette of that Exaran structure looming in the distance, Michael knew that the real challenges were only just beginning. The fate of Earth, and perhaps the entire galaxy, might rest on the success of this fragile alliance between humans and Avari. With a deep breath, Michael signaled to Vex, and they set out into the unknown, two beings from different worlds united in a common purpose. Whatever lay ahead, they would face it together, proving ground. The desert night was eerily still as Michael and Vex crept towards the Exaran facility. Their mismatched silhouettes, one human, one avian, blended into the shadows cast by towering rock formations. Michael's heart raced, acutely aware that they were vastly outgunned and outnumbered. "Ambassador," Vex whispered, his voice barely audible, "I'm detecting unusual energy fluctuations. It's like nothing I've ever seen before." Michael nodded grimly. "Whatever that Exaran are up to, it's big. We need to get closer." They inched forward, using the rugged terrain for cover. As they approached, the true scale of the Exaran structure became apparent. It was far larger than it had appeared from a distance, with crystalline spires that seemed to pierce the very sky. "Look there," Michael pointed, indicating a small opening near the base of the structure. "That could be our way in." Vex's feathers ruffled nervously. It could also be a trap. "Only one way to find out," Michael replied with a grim smile. "Cover me." Before Vex could protest, Michael darted forward, keeping low to the ground. He reached the opening without incident and peered inside. The interior pulsed with an otherworldly blue light. "It's clear," he called softly to Vex. "Come on." The young Avari hesitated for a moment before following, his steps silent on the rocky ground. Together, they slipped into the Exaran facility. The interior was a maze of twisting corridors, each bathed in the same eerie blue glow. Strange symbols adorned the walls, shifting and changing as if alive. "Can you make sense of any of this?" Michael asked, gesturing to the alien script. Vex shook his head. "Theran language was lost to us long ago. But these energy readings, they're off the charts." As they ventured deeper into the facility, the hum of machinery grew louder. They turned a corner and found themselves on a walkway overlooking a vast chamber. What they saw made them both gasp in awe and horror. A massive device dominated the center of the room, its core a swirling vortex of energy. Exaran scientists, their forms fluid and almost spectral, moved around it with purpose. By the eternal nest, Vex breathed. It's a dimensional rift generator. They're trying to tear open a hole in space-time. Michael's mind raced, piecing together the implications. A backdoor invasion. They could bring an entire armada through without warning. Suddenly, an alarm blared through the facility. Harsh red light bathed the corridors. Intruder alert, an emotionless voice announced in a language neither of them understood, but whose meaning was clear. "Time to go," Michael said, grabbing Vex's arm. They turned to flee, only to find their path blocked by a squad of Perrin guards. The aliens' forms shimmered and shifted, making it hard to focus on them. "Any bright ideas, Ambassador?" Vex asked, his voice tight with fear. Michael's eyes darted around, searching for an escape route. Then he saw it, a control panel near the walkway. "Actually, yes," he replied. "When I say now, jump over the railing." "What?" "But, trust me." Michael lunged for the control panel, his fingers flying over the alien interface. He had no idea what most of the symbols meant, but he recognized one that looked remarkably like the universal symbol for emergency shutdown. The Exaran guards advanced, raising weapons that crackled with energy. "Now," Michael shouted, slamming his hand down on the panel. He and Vex vaulted over the railing just as the room plunged into darkness. They fell for what felt like an eternity before splashing into a pool of viscous liquid below. Alarms continued to blare as they struggled to the edge of the pool. The emergency lighting cast everything in a blood-red glow. "What is this stuff?" Vex sputtered, shaking off the gleaming liquid. "No idea," Michael replied, "but I don't think we should stick around to find out. Come on." They raced through the darkened corridors, the sounds of pursuit growing closer. Michael's lungs burned, but adrenaline pushed him forward. Finally, they burst out of the facility into the cool desert night. But their relief was short-lived. The whine of energy weapons filled the air as Seren guards poured out after them. "Run!" Michael yelled, though Vex needed no encouragement. They sprinted across the open ground, energy blasts kicking up sand around them. The caves where the rest of the team waited seemed impossibly far away. Suddenly, Vex cried out in pain. An energy blast had grazed his wing, sending him tumbling to the ground. Without hesitation, Michael turned back. He scooped up the injured Avari, ignoring Vex's protests that he should save himself. "Not a chance," Michael grunted, staggering forward under Vex's weight. "We started this together, we'll finish it together." The cave entrance loomed ahead, but the Seren were closing in fast. Michael's muscles screamed in protest. They weren't going to make it. Then, just as hope seemed lost, a barrage of weapons fire erupted from the cave mouth. The survey team had come to their rescue, laying down covering fire with their newly charged weapons. With a final burst of speed, Michael crossed the last few meters and dove into the cave, Vex still clinging to him. They rolled to a stop at Sten's feet. "Cutting it a bit close, weren't you?" The commander remarked dryly, though relief was evident in his voice. Michael managed a weak chuckle, just keeping things exciting. As the team tended to Vex's injury, Michael quickly relayed what they had discovered. The gravity of the situation wasn't lost on anyone. "We need to warn the stellar wind," Jen said, "and perhaps it's time we considered your suggestion about contacting Earth authorities, Ambassador." Michael nodded, pulling out his secure communicator. "I'll make the call, but first we need tow." His words were cut off by a deafening rumble. The cave shook, dust and small rocks raining down on them. "They're trying to collapse the cave," Tira shouted. "Everyone out now," Jen ordered. They burst from the cave just as it crumbled behind them. But instead of the expected Seren attack, they were met with an astonishing sight. The night sky was alive with light and motion. The stellar wind hung low in the atmosphere, its weapons blazing as it engaged a Seren ship that had decloaked above their facility. "Impeccable timing," Michael murmured, staring in awe at the battle unfolding above them. But the wonder of the moment was shattered by the sound of approaching vehicles. Headlights cut through the darkness as a convoy of military Humvees raced towards them. "Ambassador," Jen said urgently, "if those are your people, now would be a good time to make introductions. Otherwise, we may have a three-way battle on our hands." Michael nodded, stepping forward as the vehicles screeched to a halt. He raised his hands, showing he was unarmed. "This is Ambassador Michael Chen," he called out. "I'm with the United Nations Diplomatic Corps. We have a Code Omega situation." For a tense moment, nothing happened. Then, a figure emerged from the lead vehicle. Even in the dim light, Michael recognized the insignia of a U.S. Army general. "Ambassador Chen," the man said, his voice gruff but not hostile. "Would you mind explaining why I've got reports of an alien spaceship dogfight over American soil?" Michael took a deep breath. This was the moment of truth, the culmination of everything he had worked for. "General, I'd like to introduce you to Commander Zhen of the Avari Stellar Fleet," he said, gesturing to his alien companion. "And I'm afraid we have a lot to talk about. The fate of our world, of all worlds, may depend on what we do next." As the human soldiers stared in amazement at the Avari, and the battle continued to rage in the sky above, Michael felt a glimmer of hope. Humans, Avari, united against a common threat. It wasn't how he had envisioned first contact going, but perhaps it was exactly what both their species needed. The real test was just beginning. But looking at the unlikely allies gathered around him, Michael knew that together they stood a fighting chance. Turning point. The makeshift command center buzzed with activity. Inside a hastily erected military tent, human soldiers worked alongside Avari crew members, their differences momentarily set aside in the face of a common enemy. At the center of it all stood Ambassador Michael Chen, facilitating communication between the two species. General Harrison, the gruff military leader Michael had first encountered, pored over a holographic display of the battleground. "So you're telling me these errands are trying to open some kind of space portal right under our noses?" Commander Zhen nodded, his feathers ruffling with agitation. "A dimensional rift, to be precise. If they succeed, they could bring through an invasion force large enough to overwhelm both our worlds." The general's weathered face hardened. "Not on my watch, they won't." Michael couldn't help but feel a surge of pride. Despite the shock of first contact being thrust upon them, the human military had adapted quickly. It was a testament to the resilience he had always believed his species capable of. "We need a plan," Michael said, drawing everyone's attention. "The stellar wind is keeping that Exaran ship occupied, but they can't hold out forever, and we still have that facility to deal with." Vex, his wing now bandaged, stepped forward. "Ambassador, when we were inside, I noticed something. The rift generator seemed to be drawing power from the Earth itself. If we could disrupt that energy flow, we could shut it down." Michael finished, his eyes lighting up. "Brilliant, Vex." General Harrison frowned. "That's all well and good, but how do we get close enough to do that? That place is like a fortress." A thoughtful silence fell over the group. Then, to everyone's surprise, it was Tara, the quiet pilot, who spoke up. "What if we didn't have to get close?" she said softly. All eyes turned to her. "The shuttle's sensor array, we could modify it to emit a focused electromagnetic pulse. If we got it high enough, we could fry their systems from above," Michael said, excitement building in his voice. "It's risky, but it might just work." Commander Zhen nodded slowly. "It would leave the shuttle vulnerable, but if we time it right, with cover from both the stellar wind and your Earth forces." General Harrison straightened, a determined glint in his eye. "We'll give you whatever support you need. Just tell us where to point and shoot." As the group huddled together, refining the plan, Michael felt a tap on his shoulder. He turned to find Vex looking at him nervously. "Ambassador," the young Avari said, I want to pilot the shuttle." Michael blinked in surprise. "Vex, are you sure? It's an incredibly dangerous mission." Vex straightened, a newfound determination in his posture. "I am. You showed me what real courage looks like, Michael. Now it's my turn to prove myself. A warm smile spread across Michael's face. He clasped Vex's shoulder gently. You have nothing to prove, my friend, but if this is what you want, I'll support you all the way. As the final preparations were made, a palpable tension filled the air. Human soldiers and Avari crew members alike checked and rechecked their equipment, the weight of their mission heavy on everyone's minds. Michael found himself standing at the edge of the camp, gazing up at the ongoing battle in the sky. The stellar wind's sleek form danced among the stars, exchanging fire with the Exaran vessel in a deadly ballet. Quite a sight, isn't it? Came a familiar voice. Michael turned to see Captain Zara Exlith approaching, her feathers gleaming in the Pridon light. Captain, Michael said, surprised. I didn't realize you'd come planetside. Zara's golden eyes met his. I couldn't stay aboard while my crew risked their lives. Besides, I wanted to see this alliance for myself. Michael nodded, understanding the unspoken question in her words. It's not perfect, he admitted. There's still a lot of fear, a lot of mistrust on both sides, but we're making progress. Indeed, Zara mused. You've accomplished more in a few days than I would have thought possible, Ambassador. A comfortable silence fell between them as they watched the battle overhead. Finally, Zara spoke again, her voice softer than Michael had ever heard it. I owe you an apology, Michael, she said. I misjudged your species. Misjudged you. Michael turned to her, touched by the admission. There's no need to apologize, Captain. We've all had our preconceptions challenged. What matters is how we move forward. Zara's beak curved in what Michael had come to recognize as a smile. Wisely said, let us hope we have the chance to build on this foundation. Their moment was interrupted by the sound of approaching footsteps. Commander Zhen appeared, his expression grim. It's time, he announced. The next hour was a blur of activity. Michael found himself in the heart of the Human Command Center, relaying information between the Earth forces, the Avari shuttle team, and the stellar wind. Shuttle is in position. Vex's voice crackled over the comm, initiating EMP sequence. Copy that, Michael replied, his heart racing. All units, stand by to engage. For a breathless moment, nothing happened. Then suddenly, a pulse of invisible energy radiated out from the Avari shuttle. The Exaran facility below flickered, its lights dimming. Direct hit, Vex shouted triumphantly. Their system's air. His words were cut off by a burst of static. Michael's blood ran cold. Vex, come in. General Harrison leaned in, his face taut with tension. What's happening? Before Michael could respond, the sky lit up with a blinding flash. The Exaran ship had broken off its engagement with the stellar wind and was now bearing down on the vulnerable shuttle. No, Michael breathed, watching helplessly as energy beams lanced out towards Vex's position. But then something unexpected happened. A squadron of Earth fighter jets screamed across the sky, intercepting that Exaran attack. They were joined by a wing of smaller craft from the stellar wind, the two forces moving in perfect synchronization. Well, I'll be damned, General Harrison muttered, a note of admiration in his voice. The combined Earth-Avari force drove the Exaran ship back, giving Vex the opening he needed. The shuttle dove towards the facility, which was now visibly malfunctioning. Ambassador, Vex's voice returned, strained but alive. We've got one shot at this. The EMP weakened their defenses, but the rift generator is still powering up. Michael's mind raced. They needed a way to overload the system, to turn the Exaran's own technology against them. Then it hit him. Vex, listen carefully, he said urgently. Do you remember that control panel we found? The one with the emergency shutdown? Yes, but... Forget shutdown. We need to do the opposite. Can you boost power to the generator? Push it past its limits. There was a pause as Vex considered. It's possible, but Ambassador, that could create an uncontrolled rift. The consequences. Could be catastrophic, I know, Michael finished. But it's our only shot. Trust me, Vex. Another pause, then. All right. I trust you, Michael. Initiating power surge now. The next few minutes were the longest of Michael's life. He watched, heart in his throat, as the shuttle maneuvered closer to the facility. Energy readings spiked off the charts. Suddenly, a blinding light erupted from the XRM structure. A swirling vortex appeared above it, growing larger by the second. It's working, Vex shouted. The rift is destabilizing their entire system. But the victory was short-lived. As the rift expanded, it began to pull everything towards it with irresistible force. The shuttle, the X-starring ship, even the stellar wind began to drift towards the swirling maw. All units, fall back, General Harrison bellowed. Get to minimum safe distance, now. Michael watched in horror as the shuttle struggled against the rift's pull. Vex, get out of there. I'm trying, came the panicked reply. Controls are unresponsive. Without thinking, Michael grabbed a nearby radio. Stellar wind, lock onto the shuttle's signal. Can you get a tractor beam on them? For a heart-stopping moment, there was no response. Then Captain Exelit's voice rang out. Tractor beam engaged. Pulling them in now. Michael sagged with relief as he saw the shuttle being drawn away from the rift. But the danger wasn't over. The vortex continued to grow, threatening to engulf everything in its path. Just when all seemed lost, the XRN facility imploded. The rift collapsed in on itself with a thunderous roar, taking the alien structure with it. A shockwave rippled out across the desert, kicking up a massive dust cloud. As the dust settled, an eerie silence fell over the battlefield. The XRN ship, caught in the rift's final moments, had vanished. Where the facility had stood was nothing but a smoking crater. Michael stared at the devastation, his mind struggling to process what had just happened. They had won, but at what cost? His thoughts were interrupted by a commotion outside. He rushed out of the command tent to see the Avari shuttle making a shaky landing. As soon as the hatch opened, Michael sprinted towards it. Vex emerged, looking battered but very much alive. Without hesitation, Michael pulled the young Avari into a fierce hug. You did it, Michael said, his voice thick with emotion. You saved us all. Vex returned the embrace awkwardly, his feathers ruffling with embarrassment and pride. We did it, Ambassador. All of us together. As they separated, Michael became aware of the scene around them. Human soldiers and Avari crew members were mingling, clapping each other on the back and exchanging congratulations. The barriers that had seemed so insurmountable just days ago were crumbling before his eyes. Captain Exelith approached, flanked by General Harrison. The two leaders, one alien and one human, shared a look of mutual respect. It seems, Zara said, her golden eyes twinkling, that we have much to discuss, General. Perhaps it's time for our peoples to have a proper introduction. Harrison nodded, a small smile tugging at his weathered features. I believe you're right, Captain, and I know just the man to help us do it. All eyes turned to Michael. He stood straighter, feeling the weight of the moment. Well, Ambassador, Harrison said, ready to make some history. Michael looked around at the unlikely allies gathered before him, Avari and humans, soldiers and scientists, all united by their shared victory. He thought of the challenges that lay ahead, the bridges yet to be built. But for the first time since this wild adventure began, he felt truly hopeful. With a smile that could outshine the rising sun, Michael nodded. General, Captain, my friends, I believe we already have. As the first light of dawn broke over the horizon, casting a golden glow across the desert, Michael knew that this was more than just the end of the battle. It was the beginning of a new era for both their species, and he, Ambassador Michael Chen, was ready to lead the way into that bright, shared future. New horizons. 6 months after the Battle of the Moldau, as it had come to be known, the United Nations General Assembly Hall buzzed with anticipation. Delegates from every nation on Earth filled the seats, their excited chatter creating a low hum throughout the chamber. But it wasn't just humans present today. Interspersed among the crowd were Avari representatives, their colorful feathers and elegant postures drawing curious glances and whispered conversations. At the podium stood Ambassador Michael Chen, looking out over the assembled crowd with a mixture of pride and nervousness. He adjusted his tie, took a deep breath, and began to speak. Distinguished delegates, honored guests, citizens of Earth and Avari, today marks a historic moment in the annals of both our worlds. Michael's voice rang clear through the hall, the product of months of careful negotiation and preparation. 6 months ago, our two species faced a common threat. Together, we overcame seemingly insurmountable odds. In doing so, we discovered something profound, that despite our differences, we are far more alike than we ever imagined. In the front row, Captain Zara Exlith sat beside General Harrison, both looking resplendent in their formal attire. Zara caught Michael's eye and gave an encouraging nod. Today, we take the first official step towards a lasting alliance between our peoples. The Avari-Earth Cooperation Treaty before you is more than just a document. It is a promise, a commitment to mutual understanding, shared scientific advancement, and collective security. As Michael continued his speech, detailing the key points of the treaty, he couldn't help but reflect on the journey that had brought them to this point. The months following that Severin incident had been a whirlwind of activity. Governments around the world had scrambled to come to terms with the reality of alien life. The Avari, for their part, had needed to overcome centuries of isolationist policies. There had been setbacks, of course, cultural misunderstandings, political maneuvering, and lingering fears on both sides had threatened to derail the process more than once. But every time Michael had been there, bridging the gap, finding common ground. And so, Michael concluded, his voice swelling with emotion, "I urge you all to ratify this treaty. Let us embrace this opportunity to reach for the stars together, to build a future brighter than either of our species could achieve alone." As applause filled the chamber, Michael stepped back from the podium, feeling a weight lift from his shoulders. He had done all he could. Now it was up to the delegates to decide. The next few hours were a blur of voting procedures and formal declarations, but when the final tally was announced, the result was clear. The treaty had passed with an overwhelming majority. Cheers erupted throughout the hall. Michael found himself engulfed in a sea of well-wishers, both human and Avari. As he shook hands and accepted congratulations, he caught sight of a familiar face making its way through the crowd. "Vex," Michael exclaimed, pulling the young Avari into a warm embrace. "I didn't know you were here." Vex's feathers ruffled with pleasure. "I wouldn't have missed this for anything, Ambassador. Or should I say, Secretary General of Interspecies Affairs." Michael chuckled at his new title. "Still getting used to that one. How are your studies going?" After the battle, Vex had been among the first Avari to enroll in human universities as part of a cultural exchange program. "Fascinating," Vex enthused. "I'm learning so much about Earth culture and history. Did you know humans once believed the Earth was flat?" "Well, we've come a long way since then," Michael replied with a grin. Their conversation was interrupted by the arrival of Captain Exlith and General Harrison. "Quite a speech, Mr. Secretary General," Harrison said, clapping Michael on the shoulder. "You've done your species proud." "Indeed," Zara added, her golden eyes warm with approval. "You've accomplished more than I ever thought possible, Michael. Our peoples owe you a great debt." Michael felt his cheeks flush with the praise. "I merely showed them what was possible. It's up to all of us to build on this foundation." As the celebration continued around them, Michael found himself drawn into discussions about the future. Plans for joint scientific missions, cultural exchange programs, and shared defense initiatives were already taking shape. We're considering establishing an Avari embassy in New York, Zara informed him. "Would you be willing to advise on the project?" Michael's eyes lit up at the prospect. "I'd be honored, Captain, and perhaps we could discuss sending a human delegation to your homeworld." As the night wore on, Michael eventually found a quiet moment to slip away from the crowds. He made his way to a balcony overlooking the New York skyline, the city lights twinkling like stars. He was soon joined by Vex, who leaned on the railing beside him. "Quite a view," the young Avari remarked. "It is," Michael agreed, "though I imagine it's nothing compared to the vistas on your world." Vex was quiet for a moment, his gaze distant. "You know, before I met you, I never imagined I'd be standing on an alien world, looking out over a city of millions. It's overwhelming." Michael nodded in understanding. "I felt the same way when I first set foot on the stellar wind. But that's the beauty of it, isn't it? There's so much out there for both our species to discover." "Together," Vex added with a smile. "Together," Michael echoed. Their peaceful moment was interrupted by a commotion from inside. They turned to see a group of delegates gathered around a large screen, expressions of shock and excitement on their faces. Michael and Vex hurried back inside. "What's going on?" Michael asked, pushing through the crowd. General Harrison turned to him, his face pale. "We're receiving a transmission from deep space." Michael's heart raced as he looked at the screen. Strange, unfamiliar symbols scrolled across it, accompanied by a series of musical tones. "It's not Avari," Zara said, her feathers ruffling with tension, "and it's certainly not Paxaran." "Then who?" Michael began, but he trailed off as the implications sank in. A hush fell over the room as everyone present realized what this meant. They weren't alone. There were other species out there, reaching out across the vastness of space. For a moment, Michael felt overwhelmed by the magnitude of it all. Then he felt a hand on his shoulder. He turned to see Zara, her expression a mixture of apprehension and excitement. "Well, Mr. Secretary General," she said, a hint of humor in her voice, "it seems your job just got a lot more interesting." Michael looked around the room, seeing the same mix of fear and wonder on every face, human and Avari alike. In that moment, he knew that everything they had accomplished so far was just the beginning. "All right," he said, straightening his shoulders. "Let's get to work. We have a first contact situation to prepare for." As the room erupted into a flurry of activity, Michael couldn't help but smile. This was why he had become a diplomat in the first place, to bridge divides, to foster understanding between different cultures. He had never imagined it would lead him here, to the brink of a new era for not just humanity, but for multiple species across the galaxy. The challenges ahead were daunting, to be sure. There would be new misunderstandings to navigate, new fears to overcome. But looking at the humans and Avari working side by side, united in their curiosity and determination, Michael felt a surge of hope. Whatever lay ahead, they would face it together. And isn't that, he mused, what truly makes us civilized beings? Not our technology or our achievements, but our capacity to reach out to those different from ourselves, to find common ground, and to work towards a shared future. As the first attempts to decipher the alien message began, Michael rolled up his sleeves, ready to dive in. The universe, it seemed, was far larger and more wondrous than any of them had imagined. And he, Ambassador Michael Chen, Secretary General of Interspecies Affairs, was eager to help guide humanity and their new Avari allies into this brave new frontier. The story of their shared journey was far from over. In fact, Michael realized with a mix of excitement and trepidation, it was only just beginning. As dawn broke over New York City, casting a golden light over the United Nations building, Michael stood at the window, gazing up at the sky. Somewhere up there, beyond the blue, lay countless worlds, countless species, countless possibilities. "Ready for our next adventure?" Vex asked, coming to stand beside him. Michael turned to his friend, a smile spreading across his face. "Always," he replied. "The universe is waiting. Let's go meet it." And with that, they turned back to join the others, ready to write the next chapter in the grand story of interstellar cooperation and discovery. The future, with all its challenges and opportunities, beckoned, and together, humans and Avari alike, they would answer its call.